The first light of dawn spilled across the jagged ridges of the Sierra Madre, painting the desert brush in streaks of amber and rose. A soft wind whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke from last night's fires and the distant cry of an eagle circling high above. From the crest of a rocky bluff, Nayeli stood motionless, her bare feet pressed into the cool earth as if the land itself could anchor her restless spirit. To her left stretched the world she had always known, the sweeping valleys, the rugged hills, and the hidden rivers that fed her people's camps. This was Apache land, sacred, harsh, and alive with stories sung by elders around the fire. It was the land her father had fought for, the land her mother had wept for, the land whose spirit pulsed in her own blood. To her right, just beyond the edge of her vision, thin spirals of smoke curled into the morning air from the settlers' encampment. They were faint but undeniable, ghosts of another world rising on the horizon. The settlers had brought fences where the Apache knew only open earth. They had brought tools that bit into the soil and guns that tore through silence. Yet in that encampment was something or someone who had captured her heart with a force stronger than fear. Nayeli drew in a slow breath, her chest tightening as if the morning itself pressed against her. The sun was climbing higher now, and she imagined the settlers stirring awake, men shouting orders, children crying, women stoking fires. Among them, Daniel would be there, his hands rough from work, his eyes carrying a gentleness that unsettled her. He was unlike the others, or at least she told herself that. When he looked at her, he did not see an enemy, nor did he see a savage as the others called her people. He saw only Nayeli, a woman straddling two worlds, but standing here, balanced between ridges and smoke, she felt the weight of her secret pressing against her ribs. To love Daniel was to betray her blood. To deny him was to betray her heart. A hawk screamed overhead, startling her from her thoughts. Nayeli closed her eyes, listening to the echo fade into the canyons below. Her people believed hawks carried messages from the spirit world, warnings, sometimes, or reminders. Was this cry meant for her? She thought of her father, proud and stern, who trusted her to honor the old ways. He had raised her on stories of courage, stories of warriors who never faltered in loyalty. What would he say if he knew she lingered here, caught between the rising sun of her homeland and the smoke of the settlers' camp? She clenched her fists until her nails bit into her palms. The truth was, she didn't know where she belonged anymore. Her earliest memories were filled with the rhythms of Apache life, pounding drums at ceremonies, the warmth of the fire circle, the bitter taste of herbs her grandmother pressed into her mouth when she was sick. She remembered chasing her brothers through the desert brush, their laughter carried on the dry wind. She remembered kneeling beside her mother to grind corn, the two of them humming together in a tune that belonged to no one but them. Those memories burned bright in her heart, but now they were tangled with new images, the way Daniel's voice softened when he spoke her name, the hesitant smile that seemed to chase away her doubts, the warmth of his hand brushing hers when no one was watching. The two worlds warred inside her, each pulling her in opposite directions, leaving her hollowed by the strain. The wind picked up, tugging at the strands of her dark hair, carrying the mingled scents of mesquite and distant smoke. Nayeli opened her eyes and stared once more at the horizon. For now, the ridge was her refuge, her in-between place where no one demanded answers. Here she could let the question live without speaking it aloud. Where does my heart truly belong? She knew this fragile balance could not last forever. Her people were watching her more closely. The settlers were pressing deeper into Apache land. And Daniel was waiting. The world was shifting beneath her feet like sand in a storm, and soon she would be forced to choose. But in this moment, in the pale light of dawn, she let herself linger in the silence between two worlds, a single heartbeat suspended on the edge of fate. The camp stirred to life with the rising sun. Smoke from the morning fires curled skyward, carrying the rich scent of roasting corn and mezcal. Children's laughter rang out as they chased one another between the wickiups, their bare feet kicking up dust. Dogs barked, warriors sharpened blades, and women sang soft, steady songs as they pounded grain and stone mortar. It was a rhythm Naili knew as well as her own heartbeat, a rhythm that tied her to the earth as firmly as the roots of the mesquite trees. Here, among her people, she was expected to be whole, unshaken, and loyal. Her father, Koa, was one of the most respected warriors of the Chiricahua Apache, a man whose name carried weight across the desert. Broad-shouldered and unyielding, he spoke little but acted with decisive strength. To him, the tribe's survival was sacred, each member a thread in a fabric too precious to unravel. His daughter, born under a sky heavy with stars, was part of that fabric woven tightly, expected to hold. Naili often felt her father's gaze upon her, sharp and measuring. He saw in her the fire of her ancestors and expected her to carry it forward without faltering. From him, she learned to ride bareback across rugged terrain, to move silently as a shadow through mesquite thickets, and to read the signs left by deer, coyotes, and men. He taught her that every stone and tree held memory, every river whispered of those who had walked before. "We belong to this land, Naili," he had told her once, his voice low and steady. "It is our mother. To leave her is to tear yourself from your own flesh." Her mother, Isha, wove strength into gentleness. She sang the old songs in the evenings, her voice rising like smoke into the starry sky, filling Naili with warmth and longing. She taught her daughter the ways of healing, pressing herbs into her palms and whispering their names, their spirits. She spoke of balance, of keeping one's heart steady even when the world shook with storms. From her mother, Naili inherited patience, a quiet wisdom that tempered the restless hunger in her veins. The Apache life was not easy, but it was full. Days were spent hunting, gathering, and defending what was theirs. Nights brought the comfort of the fire circle, where stories rose into the dark like spark stories of ancestors who fought against the odds, who endured when the world pressed hard against them. These stories were armor, reminders of who they were. Naili loved these moments, the closeness of the people around her, the way voices blended in songs older than memory. And yet, when she sat in the glow of the fire, surrounded by the familiar, she sometimes felt like a bird trapped in its own nest. Her eyes would wander to the horizon, to the places where stars bent low and the world seemed to open into possibilities too vast to name. Her brothers teased her for her wandering gaze. "Always dreaming," one would laugh, nudging her shoulder. "Maybe she thinks she'll find a new world out there." She would smile and brush them off. But inside, their words struck deeper than they knew, for Naili did dream. She dreamed of wide paths that stretched beyond the mountains, of faces she had never seen, of voices that spoke words in strange tongues yet stirred something in her chest. She dreamed of freedom that went beyond what her people called freedom. And when she woke, her heart beat faster, as if urging her towards something unknown. But dreams had no place in the hard soil of Apache life. The tribe needed warriors, hunters, healers, not dreamers. The elders spoke often of the dangers pressing in from the east. Settlers who carved up the land, soldiers who carried thunder in their rifles, promises of peace broken like brittle sticks. To survive, the Apache had to remain vigilant, united. Any crack in that unity could be fatal. Naili knew this truth. She carried it like a stone in her chest. And yet, when her duties were done, she found herself wandering to the ridge, staring at the settler's smoke as if it held answers she could not find among her own people. Her father noticed. He said nothing at first, only watched her more closely. Her mother, too, had seen the distance in her eyes, the way her hands sometimes stilled mid-task as if caught by a thought she dared not share. "You have the heart of a hawk, my daughter," her mother whispered one evening as they ground herbs together. always circling, searching. But remember, even the hawk must return to its nest. Nayeli nodded, though the words settled uneasily in her chest. She wanted to believe them, wanted to feel rooted in the way her people did. But the pull of something else, something just beyond the horizon, only grew stronger with each passing. The tribe saw her as one of their own, bound by duty and blood. Yet Nayeli knew that within her, a quiet rebellion was taking shape. She was proud of who she was, proud of her Apache roots. Yet her spirit strained against the invisible lines that held her in place. And deep down, she feared the day would come when her heart would force her to step beyond them. The summer sun blazed high, baking the earth until the air shimmered like a restless spirit. Nayeli moved carefully along the dry creek bed, her bow slung across her back, her steps light as a whisper. She had been sent to gather mesquite beans and search for signs of deer, but her mind wandered, tugged toward the horizon where the settlers' camp smoldered. She told herself she would not go there, that she would keep her distance. And yet, her feet carried her closer. The first time she saw him had not been by choice. Weeks earlier, during a fragile truce between her people and the settlers, she had ridden with her father to a meeting ground. The air had been sharp with suspicion, every glance edged with the weight of history. Men spoke in hard voices, words thick with mistrust. But in the corner of her vision, Nayeli had noticed a young man standing apart from the others, his posture straighter, his eyes softer. He had looked at her just once, fleeting but piercing, and in that single moment, something within her had shifted, as though the ground itself had tilted. She had tried to dismiss it. She was Apache, daughter of Koa, bound by blood to her people. He was a settler, one of the intruders. To even acknowledge that spark was dangerous, foolish. But sparks, once lit, were difficult to smother. And now, on this hot afternoon, she found herself again near the edges of their camp, crouched behind a cluster of rocks, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something she dared not name. She told herself she only wanted to watch, to understand them better. Knowledge was a kind of power, after all. But when she saw him again, moving among the others with quiet steadiness, she felt that same spark flare, no less dangerous, no less consuming. Daniel. She had learned his name from overheard voices, settlers calling for him, his answers rising clear and even. He carried himself differently from the rest, not brash, not heavy with disdain. He spoke with patience, his words laced with a gentleness that surprised her. She could not hear his conversations now, but she studied the way he moved, the way his brow furrowed in thought, the way his hands so used to labor handled even rough tasks with a care that seemed almost reverent. She should have turned away. Every instinct screamed at her to leave before someone noticed. But fate, it seemed, had a will of its own. A sudden rustle of movement betrayed her. A rabbit darted from the brush where she crouched, sending stones clattering down the slope. Startled, she pressed herself low, but it was too late. Daniel's head lifted, his gaze scanning the rocks. His eyes locked with hers. The world stilled. For a breathless instant, neither moved. The distance between them seemed to vanish, leaving only two souls suspended in silence. She expected fear or anger in his eyes, the suspicion she had seen in so many settlers before. Instead, she found only curiosity and something else, something startlingly human, as if he, too, were caught off guard by the recognition of a bond neither had chosen. Slowly, cautiously, he lifted a hand, not in warning, not in threat, but in greeting. Nayeli's heart thundered. Her instincts urged her to vanish into the rocks, to dissolve into shadow as she had been taught since childhood. But some deeper force rooted her in place. Against her better judgment, against every lesson of survival, she inclined her head ever so slightly, a gesture of acknowledgment. It was nothing, a small movement. Yet it felt like stepping across an invisible line, a line her people had drawn in blood and history. Daniel did not speak. Perhaps he understood the danger, the risk that words might carry across the camp and draw eyes they did not want. Instead, his gaze softened, as though he were silently promising that this moment was theirs alone. Nayeli pulled herself back, retreating behind the rocks until the world of smoke and voices disappeared from view. Her breath came fast, her chest aching with the force of what she had just done. She told herself it meant nothing, that it was foolish, reckless. And yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of warmth spread through her like fire catching in dry grass. As she made her way back toward her people's camp, the desert stretched wide and unforgiving around her. But inside her, a new terrain had opened, vast and uncharted. She had glimpsed something forbidden, something dangerous, and yet she could not turn her heart away. The hawk cried again overhead, circling against the blazing sky. Nayeli lifted her gaze, her steps faltering for a moment. She did not know whether the bird's cry was a warning or a blessing. Perhaps it was both. All she knew was this. The line between her world and his had already begun to blur, and there was no returning to what had been before. The desert evening was heavy with the scent of sage and smoke. As twilight deepened, the Apache camp gathered around the fire circle. Sparks rose into the darkening sky like tiny spirits dancing against the first stars. Warriors sharpened blades in silence, women wove baskets with rhythmic precision, and elders murmured low prayers. It should have felt like home, safe and familiar. But to Nayeli, the circle of fire seemed smaller than ever, the flames too sharp, the shadows too accusing. She sat near her mother, grinding herbs into a fine powder. Though her hands moved slowly, her thoughts far away. Each stroke of the stone against the mortar seemed louder than it should have been, drawing attention she didn't want. Around her, voices shifted. Not all of them were kind. "I saw her again," whispered one of the women, her voice sharp as flint. "She lingers near the edge of camp when she thinks no one is watching. She wanders too close to the settlers." Another replied, her tone low but laced with suspicion. "Perhaps she has forgotten who she is." The words were not meant for Nayeli's ears, but they carried easily on the night air. Her chest tightened. She lowered her gaze, grinding harder, hoping the rhythm of her work might drown the sound. It did not. Her younger brother, Toba, leaned close, his voice a murmur only she could hear. "They speak because you give them reason, sister. You vanish for hours. You return with eyes that look far beyond this place." "People notice," Nayeli bristled, but his words struck true. She could not deny the wandering, the stolen moments on the ridge, the dangerous glances toward the settlers' camp. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more, but her heart betrayed her. Across the fire, her father sat like a stone carved from the earth itself, silent, listening. His eyes, dark and steady, swept the circle. Though he spoke no word, his presence silenced the murmurs. Still, the unease remained, lingering like smoke that refused to disperse. The tribe had reason for suspicion. In recent weeks, the settlers had moved deeper into Apache land, felling trees, laying down markers as if the soil could be claimed by rope and ink. Scouts had returned with troubling news. The settlers carried more rifles than before, and their movements hinted at preparation for conflict. The elders spoke often of it, their voices taut with anger. The time for truce, they said, was ending, and here was Nayeli, her steps wandering toward the very people her tribe was preparing to fight. That night, after the circle dispersed and the camp grew quiet, Nayeli walked to the edge of the firelight. The desert stretched before her, vast and still, yet heavy with tension. She wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders, as if its weight could shield her from the doubts pressing in. Her mother found her there. Isha's presence was soft, her footsteps light as a whisper in the sand. "Your heart is troubled," she said gently, standing beside her. Nayeli swallowed hard. They speak of me. They think I do not hear, but I do. Her mother's eyes softened. Words are like the wind, child. They carry truth, but they also carry fear. They believe I am disloyal, Nayeli whispered. Her throat burned with the weight of the confession. Perhaps they are right. Isha studied her daughter's face, her silence both comforting and unbearable. At last she spoke. Loyalty is not so simple. A heart can belong to many things: family, people, land. And sometimes other hearts. Nayeli's eyes snapped to her mother, startled. But Isha only looked out into the desert, her expression unreadable. Be careful, daughter. The world grows sharp when hearts stray across lines drawn in blood. The people already carry fear. Do not give them reason to turn that fear upon you. The warning lingered in the air long after her mother returned to the fire dot in the days that followed. Nayeli felt eyes on her at every turn. When she fetched water, when she ground corn, when she sat alone beneath the mesquite trees, the tribe watched. Their silence was not peace. It was suspicion, coiling tighter each day. Even her father's gaze grew heavier. He asked no questions, but his eyes seemed to search her soul as though weighing what he might find. Nayeli forced herself to stand taller, to meet his look without flinching. But inside, fear churned. She wanted to believe she could keep her secret safe, hidden in the folds of her heart. Yet already, whispers were rising like a storm wind. Already, the fragile balance was shifting, and deep inside, where the truth could not be silenced, Nayeli knew, the more she lingered between two worlds, the more dangerous her place in both would become. The night was moonless, the desert sky thick with stars scattered like beads across black cloth. Nayeli moved swiftly and silently, her moccasins barely whispering against the sand. She had told her mother she was gathering herbs for the healers, but her steps carried her far beyond where herbs could be found. Each stride was both a risk and a necessity, her heart pulling her toward the place she swore she should not go down at the dry creek bed where mesquite shadows grew dense. She stopped. For a moment, she stood still, listening coyote yips in the distance, the wind rattling brittle leaves, the beat of her own pulse loud in her ears. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. Daniel. He came carefully, his boots crunching softly over stones, his hands raised slightly as if to prove he carried no threat. The dim starlight caught the edge of his face, revealing eyes that held both relief and fear. For weeks, their meetings had been stolen moments, a glance across distance, a few words exchanged in secret, the brush of hands before retreating back into their separate worlds. But tonight felt different. Tonight his presence carried a weight that pressed into Nayeli's chest. You came, he whispered, voice hushed as though the night itself might betray them. Nayeli nodded, her throat tight. I should not have. He stepped closer, careful, as though approaching a wild creature that might vanish if startled. And yet, you did. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken truths. Nayeli's eyes dropped to the ground, tracing the patterns of pebbles beneath her feet. She had promised herself she would end this, that she would stop answering the pull that brought her here. But Daniel's nearness, the warmth radiating from him even in the cool desert night, unraveled her resolve. You cannot keep meeting me, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. If my people discover this, if your people discover this, I know, he interrupted softly. I know the danger, but I can't stay away. Her head lifted, startled by the raw honesty in his tone. His eyes, steady and unguarded, found hers. Nayeli, he said, her name trembling on his lips like a prayer. I have never known anyone like you. When I look at you, I don't see Apache. I don't see enemy. I see you, her breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not even among her own people, where affection was shown through action more than words. Something inside her ached at the sound, both joy and sorrow tangled into one. Daniel stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of smoke and earth clinging to his clothes. His voice dropped lower, urgent. "Come with me. Leave this place. Leave the fighting, the suspicion, the blood. We could go somewhere new, somewhere neither of us is Apache or settler. Just a man and a woman free." The plea hung heavy in the air. Nayeli's heart thundered. For a moment, she imagined it, leaving behind the endless conflict, waking beside him in a world untouched by fear, building a life where love was not forbidden but a bond freely chosen. The thought burned bright, intoxicating, but then, like a cold wind, reality swept in. She saw her father's stern face, her mother's weary eyes, the children who laughed around the fire. She saw the land itself, stretching wide, filled with the spirits of ancestors who had bled and prayed for its survival. Could she abandon them? Could she walk away from the heartbeat of her people, the rhythm that had shaped her since birth? Her voice broke when she finally spoke. "You ask me to tear myself in two." Daniel's jaw tightened. He reached out, hesitating before letting his hand rest lightly on hers. His touch was warm, trembling with urgency. "I ask because I love you. And I fear that if you stay, the war will take you from me before I ever truly have you." Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. To cry would be weakness, and yet her heart felt raw, exposed. "If my father knew, he would kill you. Then we must leave before he does." The desert seemed to close in around them, silence pressing from every side. Nayeli pulled her hand back, clutching it to her chest as though she could hold her heart together by force alone. "I cannot answer you tonight," she said, her voice trembling. "Do not ask me again, but I must," Daniel interrupted, his tone desperate. "Because every day this land swallows us more. Your people prepare for war. Mine, they are not kind. They will not stop until there is nothing left. Nayeli, if you stay, you will lose everything. If you come, you might lose nothing but me." The words lodged deep in her chest. She could not move, could not breathe. At last, she turned away, her shadow stretching long across the sand. "Go back, Daniel." "Before someone sees," he did not move. She felt his eyes on her, heavy with longing, with fear, with love. Only when she disappeared into the mesquite shadows did he finally whisper after her, words carried faint on the wind, "I will wait." No matter how long. Nayeli did not look back. If she had, she feared she would never have the strength to walk away. The desert was restless that night. A hot wind swept through the camp, bending the flames of the fire until shadows twisted long and sharp across the ground. Warriors sat in tense silence, their blades gleaming in the glow, their eyes trained on the horizon as if danger lurked just beyond the darkness. The elders had spoken. The settlers were preparing to seize more land, and the Apache would not wait quietly to be driven aside. But for Nayeli, the greater storm brewed not on the horizon, but within her own blood. She had thought herself careful. She had moved in silence, returned before dawn, hidden the traces of her wandering. But secrets are like smoke. They rise, they linger, and they cling to everything they touch. And her father, Koa, was not a man easily deceived. He found her near the riverbank, crouched to rinse a basket she had carried all day. The moonlight shone across the water, painting her face in silver. She startled when she saw him, towering at the edge of the trees, his broad frame casting a shadow across the stones. "Daughter," he said, his voice low but heavy, like thunder rumbling before a storm. Nayeli straightened quickly, clutching the basket to her chest. "Father." For a long moment, he only looked at her. His eyes were dark, searching, as though he could peel back her skin and read the truth etched on her bones. The silence was unbearable, louder than any shout. "You go where you should not," he said at last. Her breath caught. She forced her face still, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I do only what is asked of me." His jaw tightened. "Do not lie to me, Nayeli. You wander beyond the ridge. You stray too close to the enemy. You think your people do not see? They whisper. They doubt, and their doubt weakens us." The words struck like a blade. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to summon denial. Her hands trembled against the basket, water dripping down her wrists. Koa stepped closer, the air around him taut with anger held in check. "Tell me, child of my blood, why do you risk dishonor? Why do you risk the lives of your people for secrets you keep in the dark?" Her throat burned. She wanted to stay silent, to bury the truth deep inside. But her father's gaze was merciless, unrelenting. It stripped her bare, leaving her nowhere to hide. Her voice faltered. She swallowed hard, then forced the words out. "I met one of them." The silence that followed was suffocating. Koa's breath left him like a growl. "One of them?" His hand clenched into a fist at his side. "A settler? You dare speak this to me?" Nayeli's eyes blurred with unshed tears, but she stood her ground even as her legs quaked. "He is not like the others. He does not hate us. Enough." Koa's roar cut across her words like a blade splitting wood. The river itself seemed to still under the force of it. "Do you not see, foolish girl? They come with smiles when they want peace, and with guns when they want our land. There is no difference. To trust him is to betray your ancestors, your mother, your people, and me." His words crushed against her chest, but Nayeli lifted her chin. Her voice trembled, yet it carried. "And if my heart is not a weapon of war? If it seeks something beyond blood and battle? Must I still deny it?" For the first time, doubt flickered across her father's face, but only for an instant. His expression hardened again, stone over fire. "You are Apache," he said, his voice cold now, stripped of tenderness. "Your heart does not belong to you alone. It belongs to the tribe, to the land, to every soul who has fought and bled to keep us alive. To turn from that is to tear yourself from us. And if you do, you will no longer be my daughter." The words hit harder than any blow. Nayeli staggered, clutching the basket as though it could anchor her. Her chest burned as if fire had been poured inside her ribs. Her father turned away, his broad shoulders rigid with finality. "Choose, Nayeli. Choose before the dawn comes. Stand with your people, or be lost to us forever." Then he walked into the darkness, leaving her trembling by the river, the basket forgotten at her feet. The desert wind howled through the trees, cold against her skin. She sank to her knees, her tears spilling into the river until the current carried them away. She had wanted time, but time had run out. Her father had drawn the line, and her heart was the fire that would either cross it or be extinguished within it. The dawn broke not with birdsong, but with the crack of rifles. Nayeli jolted awake to the sound of shouting, the ground beneath her trembling with a stampede of running feet. Smoke rose sharp and acrid, stinging her nose as she scrambled from her wickiup. The camp was chaos, women herding children toward the cover of the trees, warriors shouting orders, arrows already flying through the air. The settlers had come. From the ridge, she saw them advancing, their figures dark against the rising sun. They carried rifles, their barrels flashing fire and thunder, their boots stomping into Apache soil as though they had always owned it. Horses whinnied, arrows whistled, and screams tore through the morning air. Her father's voice boomed above the din. "To arms, drive them back!" Nayeli's heart raced, her bow clutched tight in her hand. She wanted to stand beside her people, to answer her father's command with courage. Yet in the distance, her eyes caught a figure she knew too well, Daniel, running among the settlers, his face pale with fear, but his movements purposeful. He carried no rifle, only a satchel, but he was there. On the wrong side of the battle, her breath caught, and the world tilted. She loosed an arrow into the fray, its path vanishing into the chaos, but her eyes could not leave Daniel. He stumbled, ducked, pulled a fallen settler to safety, and then his gaze found hers across the smoke and blood. For one suspended heartbeat, it was only them, the war falling away. His lips formed her name. A gunshot cracked close, splintering stone near her head. Nayeli dropped to the ground, her chest heaving. The world rushed back, the cries of her people, the thunder of hooves, the hiss of arrows. She rose again, torn between the ridge and the battlefield, between her father's voice and Daniel's pleading eyes. Suddenly, she saw him fall. Daniel crumpled into the dust, clutching his side. The settlers surged around him, too focused on the fight to notice one of their own had gone down. Panic seized her, cold and sharp. Without thought, without plan, Nayeli sprinted toward him. Her father's shout cut through the air. Nayeli! But she did not stop. The battlefield swallowed her. Bullets whined past her ears, dirt exploded under her feet, men shouted in languages that clashed like steel. She dropped to her knees beside Daniel, whose face was white with pain, his shirt darkening with blood. "You shouldn't have come," he rasped, his hand reaching weakly for hers. "And leave you to die?" She shot back, her voice breaking. She pressed her hands against his wound, her fingers slick with blood. Around them, the clash of war raged like a storm, but in that moment, the world narrowed to his breath against her cheek, the tremor in his grip. From the ridge, her father's eyes locked on her. His face was a mask of fury and heartbreak, his voice carrying above the chaos. "Traitor!" The word struck her harder than any bullet. Her heart twisted, torn in two. To save Daniel was to betray her people. To abandon him was to betray herself. There was no path that did not bleed. Another settler lunged toward her, rifle raised. Instinct took over. She drew her knife and slashed, the man falling with a cry. Her chest heaved, her vision blurred. She could no longer tell if she was Apache warrior or desperate lover, perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Daniel coughed, blood at the corner of his mouth. "Run," he whispered. "Save yourself." But she could not move. Not yet. Around them, the battle turned brutal. Warriors fell, settlers pressed forward, and the land itself seemed to cry out beneath the weight of their violence. Smoke and dust choked the air, drowning the morning light. Nayeli's tears streaked down her face, hot and unrelenting. She cradled Daniel against her, her bow abandoned in the dirt. Above, the hawk circled, screaming its harsh cry into the storm. She knew then that no matter what choice she made, she would lose a piece of herself. To save him was to sever her bloodline. To let him go was to sever her heart. And as the battlefield raged on, Nayeli realized the choice was no longer about victory or survival. It was about who she would be when the smoke cleared, Apache daughter, forbidden's lover, or something caught forever between. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun, but its echoes clung to the land like ash after fire. Smoke hung low in the valley, blotting out the sun. The cries of the wounded mixed with the silence of the dead, and the earth was dark with blood, Apache and settler alike. Nayeli knelt in the dust, her hands still stained red, Daniel's weight heavy in her arms. His breath was shallow, uneven, each inhale a struggle. She had pressed her shawl against his wound, whispering prayers in her people's tongue, though she no longer knew if the spirits listened. His eyes fluttered open, soft and glassy. "You stayed," he murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the pain. "I could not leave," she whispered back. Though the words burned, a shadow fell over them. Nayeli looked up to find her father Koa, standing just paces away, his war club streaked with blood, his eyes harder than stone. The warriors behind him stilled, their faces etched with disbelief. Their daughter, their sister, cradling the enemy as though he were her kin. For a long, terrible moment, no one spoke. The wind carried only the crackle of dying fire and the circling cry of a hawk overhead. "Rise," Koa commanded, his voice a blade. Nayeli's arms tightened protectively around Daniel. Her heart pounded, every beat a defiance. "He will die without help." Koa's jaw clenched. "Better he dies than you shame us further." The words struck her like arrows. Yet when she looked at Daniel, pale and trembling in her embrace, she knew her choice was already made. She lowered her head, her voice steady though her soul shook. "Then I will carry this shame." Gasps rippled through the warriors. Her father's eyes narrowed, his breath heavy with fury, but also sorrow, deep and unspoken. He turned away, his voice cutting the air. "She is no longer my daughter." The words carved themselves into her chest. Deeper than any wound dot by nightfall, the Apache had retreated into the hills, carrying their injured, their dead, their rage. Nayeli did not follow. She remained in the valley with Daniel, tending his wound, watching over him as the settlers regrouped. When his eyes opened again, he whispered her name as if it were both question and answer. Days passed. Daniel grew stronger, though the scar would remain. Nayeli did not see her people again. She heard their songs faintly in the distance sometimes, carried on the wind songs she no longer had the right to sing. She was between worlds now, belonging to neither fully. The settlers regarded her with suspicion, their stares sharp and unwelcoming. To them, she was still Apache, a reminder of the land they sought to claim. Yet to her people, she was lost, branded by her father's words, her place at the fire circle taken by silence. One evening, she climbed the ridge where it had all begun. The horizon stretched wide before her, the smoke of the settlers' camp to the east, the shadow of her people's mountains to the west. The wind tangled her hair, carrying with it the scent of mesquite, the memory of drums, the echo of Daniel's voice calling her name. She stood between them, as she always had, heart split, soul restless. She had chosen love, but at a cost she could never repay. The land beneath her feet no longer felt like home, yet she could not tear it from her blood. The hawk circled above, its cry sharp against the twilight. She lifted her gaze to it, her chest tightening. Perhaps the bird carried the message her spirit had always known, that some hearts are not meant to belong wholly to one world. Some are fated to live in the space between, torn but unbroken, their legacy carried in the choices that scar and shape them. Nayeli closed her eyes. She saw her mother's gentle face, her father's unyielding gaze, her people's firelit songs. She saw Daniel smile, his trembling hand reaching for hers, the life they might still build in the cracks left by war. When she opened her eyes again, the horizon remained two worlds forever apart, and she, a lone figure caught in the expanse between. The story of Nayeli would not be sung around the Apache fire, nor written in the settlers' ledgers. Yet in the silence of the desert, in the cry of the hawk, in the wind whispering through mesquite trees, her tale would live on, a heart torn, a choice made, and a woman who bore its weight for all the days of her life.